I'm 84 now, and when I sit by my window in the early morning, watching the light slowly move across the floor, I find myself thinking about all the things I used to believe mattered when I was young. Back then, I thought life was about big achievements, about proving something to the world, about building a life that looked impressive from the outside. I believed that success had a certain shape, that happiness came from reaching certain milestones, and that if I worked hard enough, everything would fall into place the way I imagined. When I was young, I didn't pay much attention to the small things. I thought they would always be there. I thought stability, health, relationships, all of it was permanent in some quiet, unspoken way. I didn't think about losing them because loss felt like something that happened to other people, not to me. I was a school teacher for most of my life. I spent my days in classrooms filled with noise and energy, children asking questions, laughing, sometimes crying. I used to come home exhausted, thinking that one day when I retired, I would finally have time to rest. I imagined that phase of life as something peaceful and easy, like stepping into a quiet room after years of chaos. But life doesn't unfold the way we picture it when we're young. I was married for 46 years. My husband Daniel was a quiet man, not the kind who filled a room with his voice, but the kind who made everything feel steady just by being there. When I was younger, I didn't always appreciate that. I thought stability was boring. I thought excitement was what mattered. I didn't realize that calm, dependable love is one of the rarest things in this world. When he passed away, the house felt different. Not empty in the way people describe it, but unfamiliar, like something had shifted in the foundation. That's when I started noticing things I had never really paid attention to before. The first thing I noticed was the importance of having a place that is truly yours. I don't mean something fancy. I don't mean a big house or a perfect home. I mean a place where your name is on something, where you don't feel like you're borrowing space from someone else's life. I live in a small, slightly worn house at the edge of town. The paint is peeling in places, the kitchen cabinets don't close properly, and there's a soft creak in the hallway floor that I've learned to step over. But it's mine. After Daniel died, my son suggested I move into a smaller apartment. He said it would be easier, less to manage, safer, and maybe he was right. But I couldn't do it. Because this house, this imperfect, aging house, is the last place where I don't feel like I have to adjust myself to fit into someone else's space. I've seen what happens to people who don't have that. A neighbor of mine, Mrs. Collins, rented her entire life. She was kind, always smiling, the type of person who never complained. But after she turned 75, things started changing. Rent went up. Buildings got sold. She had to move again and again. Each time, she packed her life into boxes. Each time, starting over in a place that never quite felt like hers. The last time I saw her, she looked tired in a way I can't quite describe. Not just physically, but emotionally. She told me, "I'm so tired of not knowing where I'll be next year." That stayed with me because there is something deeply grounding about knowing where you belong, even if that place is small, even if it's imperfect. It's not about ownership in the financial sense. It's about having a corner of the world where you don't feel temporary. The second thing I've come to understand is the quiet blessing of being able to move on your own. My legs are not what they used to be. Some mornings they ache before I even get out of bed. I move slower now. Stairs take effort. Walking to the mailbox feels longer than it used to. But I can still walk. And I didn't realize how important that was until I saw what happens when that ability fades. There was a man I used to know, Harold. He was active well into his 70s. Always outside, always fixing something, always moving. Then one winter he slipped on ice. A simple fall, something that could happen to anyone. He broke his hip. At first, everyone thought he would recover, and he did to a point, but he was never the same. He went from walking freely to using a cane, then a walker. Eventually, he needed help just to leave the house. I remember something he said to me once. He said, "I used to go wherever I wanted. Now I have to wait for someone else to decide when I can go." There was a quiet sadness in his voice that I didn't fully understand at the time, but I do now. Because when you lose the ability to move freely, your world becomes smaller. Not just physically, but emotionally. You begin to depend on others in ways that are hard to accept. You start asking for things you once took for granted. I'm not there yet. I can still walk to the small park down the street. I take my time. I rest when I need to. But I can go. And that means more to me now than any achievement I once chased. The third thing, and this one surprised me the most, is how much it matters to have even one person who truly listens. When I was younger, I had many people around me, colleagues, neighbors, other parents from school. There was always someone to talk to. I never thought about what it would feel like to not have that, but as the years passed, things changed. People moved away. Some passed on. Some simply drifted out of my life without any clear reason. Now my circle is small, very small, but I have one person, my older brother, Thomas. We don't talk every day, sometimes not even every week, but when we do, he listens, not just to respond, not just to fill silence, but to actually hear me. We talk about simple things, the weather, memories from when we were children, small details that wouldn't matter to anyone else, but when I hang up the phone, I feel lighter. And I've come to realize that's what matters, not how many people you know, not how busy your social life looks. Just having one person who reminds you that you are still seen, still heard, still part of something. I know people who go days without speaking to anyone, days that turn into weeks. I see the way it changes them, the way silence slowly settles into their lives. Loneliness doesn't always arrive suddenly. Sometimes it builds quietly over time until one day you realize you haven't heard your own voice in conversation for longer than you can remember. If you have even one person who listens to you, truly listens, you have something incredibly rare. And I didn't understand that when I was young. I thought connection would always be there. I was wrong. The fourth thing I didn't understand when I was young was how much it would mean to have children who still choose to stay connected to you. When I was raising my family, life was busy in a way that never really gave me time to reflect. There were schedules to follow, meals to cook, bills to pay, problems to solve. I had 4 children, each with their own personalities, their own needs, their own ways of seeing the world. Some days felt like a blur of noise and responsibility, and I'll be honest, there were moments when I just wanted quiet. Back then, I assumed that no matter what happened, we would always be close. I thought family bonds were automatic, something that didn't need attention or care to survive. I believed that love alone would hold everything together, but time has a way of testing those beliefs. As my children grew older, they built their own lives, careers, marriages, responsibilities of their own, and slowly, without any big moment marking the change, the dynamic shift. I was no longer at the center of their world. And that's how it should be, but it's not something you fully understand until you're standing on the other side of it. Some of my children call often, others not as much. One of my daughters, the second youngest, calls me every few weeks, not on a strict schedule, not out of obligation, but when she has time. And when she does call, she talks to me like I still matter in her life. She asks how I'm feeling. She tells me about her day. Sometimes she asks for advice, and sometimes she just wants to hear a familiar voice. Those conversations, they stay with me long after we hang up, because I've seen the other side of it too. I have a neighbor, Mr. Patel. He has 2 sons, both successful, both living in different cities. They send money when he needs it. They visit once or twice a year, and from the outside, everything looks fine. But I've sat with him on quiet afternoons when he admits, in a voice barely above a whisper, they don't really talk to me anymore. There's a difference between being supported and being wanted. Money can take care of your needs. Visits can check a box. But genuine connection, the kind where someone calls just to hear your voice, just because they want to, that's something else entirely. And I don't think there's a simple explanation for why some relationships stay close while others fade. It's not just about how you raise them. It's not just about effort. Life is complicated. People change. Circumstances shift in ways we can't control. But I've come to understand this much: if your children still choose to include you in their lives, not out of duty, but out of genuine care, then you have something incredibly meaningful. And if that's not your reality, I don't judge it. I've lived long enough to know that families are rarely simple stories. There are things that happen behind closed doors that no one else sees. There are wounds that don't heal the way we hope they will. But when that connection does exist, even in a small way, it's worth holding on to. The 5th thing I've come to value is something I used to underestimate completely: having enough. Not abundance, not luxury, just enough. When I was younger, I thought financial success meant security. I thought the more you had, the safer you would feel. And for years, I worried about money. I worried about whether I was saving enough, earning enough, planning enough for a future that always felt far away. When I retired, that worry didn't disappear. In fact, it got louder, because suddenly there was no steady paycheck, no room to recover from mistakes. Just what I had managed to set aside, and whatever came in each month. I live on a modest pension and Social Security. It's not a lot. There are no extra luxuries. I don't travel. I don't spend freely. I watch every bill, every grocery trip, every unexpected expense, but I have enough. And I didn't realize how important that was until I saw people who didn't. A woman I used to work with, Linda, was one of the most hardworking people I've ever known. She worked for decades, rarely took time off, always did what she was supposed to do. But life doesn't always reward effort the way we expect. After she retired, things didn't go as planned. Medical expenses, rising costs, things she couldn't control. I remember running into her at a pharmacy once, and she quietly told me she had to choose between buying her medication and buying enough groceries for the week. That stayed with me, because that kind of stress, it doesn't just affect your finances, it affects your dignity, it affects the way you see yourself, the way you move through the world. When you have enough, even just enough to cover your basic needs without having to ask for help, there is a quiet sense of independence that comes with it. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to rely on others in ways that make you feel small. I'm not wealthy, not even close, but I can pay my bills. I can keep the lights on. I can buy my groceries without fear. And that is something I no longer take for granted. The 6th thing is something I didn't even realize I was carrying for most of my life: anger. Not loud anger, not the kind that shows up in arguments or raised voices. I mean the quiet kind, the kind that stays inside you, settles into your thoughts, follows you into your sleep. For years I held on to things people said to me that hurt, things that didn't go the way I expected. decisions I made that I regretted, moments I wished I could go back and change. I would lie in bed at night, replaying conversations from years ago, thinking about what I should have said, what I should have done differently, holding on to resentment toward people who had probably long since moved on with their lives. And it was exhausting. Not all at once, not in some dramatic moment, but slowly over time I started letting it go. Not because everything was resolved, not because I forgave everyone in some perfect, complete way, but because I got tired of carrying things that no longer served any purpose. I realized that the people I was holding anger toward weren't thinking about me. They weren't losing sleep over the same memories. I was the only one still carrying that weight. And one day I just stopped. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. And something changed. I started sleeping better. I started feeling lighter, even if nothing around me had actually changed. I don't know if that's wisdom or just age. Maybe it's both. But I do know this: holding on to anger for too long becomes a burden that only you carry. And at some point, you have to decide whether it's still worth it. The seventh thing, the last one, is something I never expected to matter as much as it does now. Having a reason to wake up. When I was younger, I never questioned that part of life. There was always something waiting for me in the morning, a job to go to, children to take care of, responsibilities that pulled me out of bed whether I felt like it or not. I didn't have to think about purpose because it was built into my day. But when those things slowly disappear, when the job ends, when the children grow up, when the house becomes quiet, you realize that waking up is no longer automatic in the same way. You have to find a reason. And that's harder than people think. After I retired, and especially after Daniel was gone, there were mornings when I would open my eyes and just lie there. No schedule, no urgency, no one waiting for me. The silence felt heavier in those moments, like the day was stretching out in front of me with no clear direction. At first, I thought that was what I had been working toward all my life: peace, rest, freedom from obligation. But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like something was missing. I started noticing people around me who were in the same place. Some of them adjusted. They found routine, small habits. They gave structure to their days, but others, they didn't. I remember a man named Walter who lived a few houses down. After his wife passed, he stopped going out as much. At first, it was small things. He skipped his usual walks. He stopped attending the weekly gatherings he used to enjoy. Then slowly he stopped leaving the house altogether. People would check on him now and then, but there was a distance in him that hadn't been there before. One day I asked him how he was doing, and he shrugged and said, "I just don't see the point of getting up some days." That sentence stayed with me because I understood it more than I wanted to admit. That's when I realized having something, anything that pulls you into the day is not a small thing. It's everything. For me, it started with something very simple. There's a small wooden table by my kitchen window. Every morning I make a cup of tea and sit there. Outside, I hung a bird feeder years ago, back when Daniel was still around. I never paid much attention to it then. It was just something nice to have. But now it's become part of my routine. Every morning the birds come. Different ones, different colors, different sounds. Some days it's quiet, just a few sparrows. Other days there's more activity, more movement. I sit there and watch them, not because it's exciting, but because it gives me a reason to begin the day. It's small, almost insignificant if you look at it from the outside, but it's mine. And then there's Noah. He's my neighbor's grandson. He's 9 years old, full of energy, always talking, always asking questions. His grandmother started asking me couple of years ago, if I could walk him home from school a few days a week, it's only a short distance, just a few blocks. At first I agreed because I thought I was helping her. But over time I realized he was helping me. Every afternoon around the same time, I know he'll be there waiting, and he talks the entire walk home about school, his friends, things he's excited about, things that upset him. Sometimes I don't even have to respond much. Just listening is enough. And on the days when I feel tired, when my legs ache more than usual, when I think about staying inside and skipping it, I remember that he's expecting me. So I get up, I put on my shoes, and I go, not because it's a big responsibility, not because anyone would blame me if I didn't, but because it matters to him and quietly to me. I've come to understand that purpose doesn't have to be something grand. It doesn't have to impress anyone. It just has to exist. Because the people I've seen fade the fastest, they're not always the sickest. They're not always the oldest. They're the ones who no longer have anything pulling them forward. No reason to get up, no one waiting, no small moment in the day that feels like it belongs to them. And once that disappears, something inside them starts to fade too. I'm not there. Not yet. I still have my mornings by the window. I still have the quiet comfort of watching the world wake up in small ways. I still have Noah waiting for me in the afternoon. I still have my brother's voice on the phone. I still have the familiar feeling of this house around me. These things, they're not impressive. They won't be written about. They won't be remembered by anyone else. But they're enough. And at this stage of life, I've learned that enough is something you don't recognize until you've seen what it looks like without it. So when I look at my life now, I don't measure it the way I used to. I don't think about what I achieved or what I could have done differently or how things might have turned out if I had made other choices. I think about what's still here, a place that belongs to me, a body that still carries me, even if slowly. A voice on the other end of the phone that reminds me I'm not alone. Children who still reach out in their own way, enough to live without fear. A mind that has learned, finally, to let go of what no longer matters. And small reasons, quiet, ordinary reasons, to keep showing up each day. I don't have all of these perfectly. Some days are harder than others. Some nights feel longer. Some moments remind me of what I've lost. But I have enough of them, and that's why I'm still okay. If you're listening to this and you have even a few of these things in your life, don't overlook them the way I once did. Because one day you'll realize they were never small at all. They were everything. And by the time I understood that most of the world I used to know had already changed, but these things stayed, quietly, faithfully, still here, and for now, so am I.